Okay. All right. So welcome everybody again to another MIGOP candidate Zoom Q&A hosted by the precinct delegates of Van Buren County. My name is Heath Wall, precinct delegate for Paw Paw Township. And tonight we're hosting candidates for administrative, grassroots, and outreach chair positions. So let me introduce some of the candidates that we did invite. We invited for the admin chair, Chris Cummins and Ali Hassan. For the grassroots chair, we invited Chuck Murphy and Marian Sheridan, and Marian is with us tonight. For the outreach chair position, we did invite Curtis Clark, Zach Smith, and Rolla Mackey. So of those, we did have some that said they were in attendance. So if they do join, we'll include them as well in our discussion. But before we begin, just a couple of quick things for our discussion tonight. If those that are joining and listening, if we can just stay on mute to allow the candidates to hear questions and answer, that'd be great. Marian, I know you're the only one, but the format for tonight, we were just going to ask maybe just for a 1 or 2 minute introduction. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, why you decided to run, anything like that. And then we'll ask a couple of questions, 2 or 3 questions that we came up with. If there's any in the chat that we end up with, we'll give like 2-minute questions and we'll go with that. So with that, we'll get started. So go ahead, Marian, introduce yourself and let us know about yourself.
Great. Yes. So if you haven't met me before, my name's Marian Sheridan and I'm running for Grassroots Vice Chair. I am presently the sitting Grassroots Vice Chair. And it just seemed like such a perfect fit for me. I'm a Tea Party leader. I took over, I was a co-founder of a Tea Party and I took it over in 2014. And I still run those Tea Parties to this day. We meet monthly and we have about 100, 150 people at it. So it's a very large active Tea Party. And, it's like I've just always felt that the grassroots is what's going to save our country. And, over the time that I've been involved, it's become scarier and scarier. And so when it came to running again, I had to really, after November, I had to really think hard if this is something that would help or, did I just want to go into a different direction? And if I can tell you a little bit about the things I'm working on, you might understand better how I came to the decision to run, because I really think that being Grassroots Vice Chair can help me in some of these ways on some of the projects that I'm working on. I'm going to call them projects because they really are. Before I get into that, I'm going to give you a little bit more background on me. I helped organize hundreds of volunteers to serve at rallies in 2016 for then presidential candidate Donald Trump. I've twice been elected to the national Trump delegation to the RNC. I was elected a presidential elector. If anybody remembers Operation Gridlock, I was one of the organizers of that. Operation Haircut, same thing. We did Cannonball Run for Trump across Michigan in the fall of 2020. I've helped organize 3 battle cry conferences, 16 mock conventions, and over 300 grassroots statewide meetings. Another passion of mine is election integrity, and I've been involved in election integrity since 2016. Before we really started to realize how corrupt our elections had gotten, I was working at recruiting people to go to TCF, which was then Cobo Hall in 2016. And I can't tell you the panic I felt when I realized that what was going to be happening there, because I never knew this stuff before. Even though I was involved in a lot of things, I never knew that at TCF, they counted thousands and thousands of absentee ballots. And when I found out that they weren't going to have one Republican there to oversee this process, it really concerned me. So I worked to get people there. This was the day before the election. I ended up finding 28 people that would go down there and work. I've been down to TCF 8 times since then myself with poll challengers, working to help to secure the count down there. In 2020, you know, it was such a mess. I was down there trying to train poll challengers the day after the election. I was asked by Mike Lindell, Sydney Powell, Rudy's team of attorneys to actually participate in some of the litigation, which I did. And it's really been a good thing. I've gotten to know attorneys across the country that have, it's really been helpful in reaching out to the grassroots and setting up, for example, I've become involved with the Thomas More Society because of my connections to being Grassroots Vice Chair. And while I was bringing them in the state to meet with state legislators, because we were trying to convince them that there was things in our election that they needed to appoint a special investigator. And to our disappointment, we got nowhere with them, but I made these incredible connections with the Thomas More Society and the attorneys. And I set up the attorneys with some of the election integrity organizations in our state. And, you know, if there's anything that I could tell delegates is there is like some great stuff going on behind the scenes. I don't want them to be disheartened. This has been incredible. We now have lawsuits that are about to be dropped on major things like ERIC, which is the Electronic Registration Information Center. And what we're finding is that our Secretary of State is sharing personal information, your social security number, your address, your phone number, with this ERIC system, which is has progressive ties, and they're sharing your information probably with multiple other progressive organizations. If we can plug that hole, it's not everything, but it's a pretty big gaping hole in our election integrity. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that ends up. The attorneys are incredible. I'm also, there's going to be other great lawsuits that are about to come from those connections. And I'm also working with the Great School Initiative, which has its goal is to defeat rogue sex education in our public schools. We're going to get through that and then go on to other things. But Thomas More Society has developed these opt-out forms because according to our state laws, every parent has the right to opt their child out of sex education. So what does that mean? Sex education is supposed to be in a classroom at a certain time. And so if a parent opts their child out of sex education and their second grader, their third grader goes to a classroom that has books about sex in its classroom library, that's a violation of that state statute. So these schools are going to be sued. It's like you just can't do that. And this will be huge across our country. We already see so many of the progressive organizations and progressive news media lining up trying to attack us on this, but it's totally lawful that we opt our children out of sex education and they need to obey the state law. So I'm really excited about this. The whole goal is safety and protection of our children, and that's what our schools should be aligned with. So that's going to be exciting. There's so many other things happening. I really want to start a conference or a summit where we try to attract more conservative attorneys, and we'd having great attorneys, maybe David Coleman from the Great Lakes Justice Center, Justice William Wagner, Eric Cardall from the Thomas More Society, and speak about the courage and the objective and the goals that we need with conservative attorneys. Because I think they're out there, they just don't know how to help. So we need to reach out to them. Another thing that I want to work on is like, there's lots of things. I organized a social media. I call it Social Media Warriors, and that group needs to be greatly expanded so that we can promote our message beyond what the fake news wants to do, because they so much want to just bury stories that shed the Democrat Party in a bad light, and there's plenty of them, and they want to bury all that. But if we have 500 people on social media that are promoting our message and also exposing what they're doing, we can overcome that, because more and more people nowadays are looking for alternative media sources, because the majority of people don't trust our media. So I know I've probably unloaded a whole lot.
That's fine. That's exactly what this is all about. So I appreciate that. So that definitely helps out. So, but good. So let me do this. I know for some, maybe or not, or those that might watch this before, right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't know that everybody always understands the different definitions of some of the roles that are in the leadership. You know, we always hear about some, but we don't always get a good glimpse of some of the other supporting roles that are equally as important to driving, like you just outlined, so many different things that are going on. So one of the definitions that I was able to find, and maybe you could add to it a little bit if it helps those viewers, is from a grassroots perspective, supervise and direct all activities relating to precinct delegate recruitment, voter registration, volunteers, and get out the vote efforts. Does that kind of sum it up, or is there more you wanted to add, just to give people kind of a clearer picture of exactly what your role is?
Right.
And then we can kind of maybe
Right.
go into a few questions as well.
Yeah, no, it really is. It has I think even more so, it's become so important to pull in the role. Over the last few years, since I told you about 2016, I became involved as a co-host for Women for Trump events. And we used those events to, first off, energize women who felt beaten down by the media, that, you know, it's like, oh, women don't really like President Trump. And so these women would come to these events and they were so excited. We would have a great time. And, you know, they would come and see other like-minded women, and they had a great time in this safe space.
Mhm.
But at these events, I was able to recruit actually like 1,600 people that wanted to have their name added to the list for poll challengers. And through these events, recruited 1,200 precinct delegates. It was a game changer. And it, you know, it's like, I know so much of the enthusiasm came off of the fact that, you know, people just loved Donald Trump, and they were very excited to be at these events. We had fashion shows by Ivanka. We had fashion shows featuring Ivanka Trump fashions. I mean, it was just like, we had a great time. So I think that more so now than maybe that definition from before, it's even more relevant that we're there recruiting people for election workers, poll challengers, precinct delegates, just trying to encourage and keep up the spirits of after like a November election. I mean, we can't afford to have people leave the party or give up.
Right.
We need to like encourage them to walk toward the fire. And it's hard some days. It's really hard, but it's something that I think together, when people are working in groups and they see other people that are like-minded, they're encouraged and, they're willing to continue then.
Right. Very good. So you kind of hit on a couple of things. So one of the questions we have kind of dovetails in that. We'll just get into a couple here. With Prop 2, do you find any foreseeable challenges to overcome? I mean, I've already gotten a letter saying, hey, if we go to these many days, will you be able to work X one? Because I did work last November. So with that, do you foresee challenges? And then how do you foresee maybe even overcoming those challenges as that comes online?
Well, absolutely. The 9 days is going to be a huge challenge. All the precinct, I worked very closely with Matt Seifrey, and we recruited 5,000 poll challengers and election workers. Now that number is going to have to be times 9.
Right.
So it's an incredible hurdle. But I think people now realize that it isn't so, you can't just vote. People put on the sticker that says, I voted, like they should receive an award for that. It's like, no, we have to vote and we have to protect our vote. And that means that whether it's day 1 or day 9 of voting, we have to be there to make sure that our vote counts and our fellow Americans' vote counts equally. So I want to pivot a little bit, because I think, it's like working so much on some of this stuff, I don't really get much of a chance at times. I mean, it's only like during the election time that you really have access to all the delegates. So I feel bad for the delegates because they don't really know everything that's going on behind the scenes, and they can get disheartened by it. But let me tell you something that I think is, I'm very guardedly optimistic about. But there's a case coming out of, I think it's North Carolina, called Harper versus Moore. Now this case is being heard in the U.S. Supreme Court, and it has to do with redistricting. But put that aside, because that's not really what our interest is. Our interest is the fact that the Supreme Court is going to rule on this, whether the legislature is the ones that are the final arbitrators about election law. Does election law come from a redistricting committee? Does it come from a petition on a ballot? Does it come from the voters? And the Supreme Court is about to rule on this. And we're guardedly optimistic that they're going to rule in favor of the legislature. What does this mean? This means that Prop 2 is illegal. So, I mean, we're, hopefully, this can get in place in time to impact the 2024 election. And I think there'll be a big struggle where, our attorneys are trying to get that done. And then you'll have the state attorneys for the governor and the attorney general trying to slow that down. But they can only do that so much. And we have 2 years. So I'm very excited about that, because that would be such an answer to prayer.
That would be.
So if anybody's out there, if you're prayer warriors, please pray about this, because this could be a real game changer for our state in regaining control and authority over our elections.
That's right. Very good. So when it comes to precinct delegates, because we have several on here, and we'll be sending this out to many more, and especially now that we have now state delegates as of last week as well. When it comes to just general recruitment, some of the questions and people were kind of asking, when it comes to recruitment, it seems like it's all done like within county and things like that. But where do you see maybe your role helping that? I know we've seen a huge uptick in that, but I think there was a lot of interest after the last election of wanting to do that. But going forward, what is the strategy from your position to help with precinct delegate recruitment, retention, and engagement, as it were, just
Mhm.
anything around that. So how does your role help the recruitment process for delegates?
Uh-huh. Well, I think, as I've explained, it's like I really have been using the grassroots vice chair position as a recruitment tool, coupled with the Women for Trump events. And, I think education is so important. We have so many people that come into the party as precinct delegates, and they have no idea, like, we really need like a precinct delegate manual at the very least that really explains what these people are going to be doing at the next convention, possibly their first convention. Now we have precinct delegates. They probably feel like they've been drinking through a water hose since August.
Mhm.
But in my own area, it's like, which is southeast Michigan. I've been putting on mock conventions, and now we just hosted, like last week, the 16th mock convention. So these have been going on since probably about 2016, where we would just even role play and really, make sure that the delegates knew what to expect. We educated them on even issues that they may encounter, like how to make sure that your convention is held according to your bylaws, and what to look out for, because it's like, it's just not fair for them to go through the trouble of getting elected and then go to a convention that they're just going to get steamrolled over.
Mhm.
So we thought it was very important to be teaching precinct delegates what they can expect, what they need to look out for, and how important it is to work together as a block to, and the main thing is, like, we all want platform principles upheld. The Republican platform is a great document, and we want candidates that recognize that and are in the fight for our state and country, that recognize that, and not candidates that are in their resume building or looking to see, where their next position is going to be. And it's, a lot of this is up to the precinct delegates. So we want them to be educated, and we want them to stay in the game. We don't want them to get discouraged. I do get worried, it's like that if our conventions are too much of a food fight, that we end up losing some of these new delegates that they're just like, this is not for me. This isn't what I signed up for. So I think communication is very key to them. And I almost think like we should, they absolutely should receive some type of welcoming letter from the party
Mhm.
that says, welcome to the team. We're so glad to have you on board. So
I
there's a
agree.
lot of work to do.
Okay, great, thank you. When it comes to getting volunteers and registration and things, one of the questions that came in is sometimes it feels like we're always a little bit behind when it comes to really getting people to do something. We're always strapping to the last minute to get volunteers or whatever else. And I know from your discussion already that's been very passionate about getting those and people. What would you continue to do to kind of help get ahead of that campaign season, as it were, getting people to register, getting people to vote and volunteer well before the primaries and the elections, instead of, because I remember getting some emails around, hey, we're still short.
Yeah,
And we know that the Democrats are so well mobilized. I mean, they have that down to
yeah,
a T way before that.
yeah.
Is there more we can do at a county level, at a precinct level? I mean, what can be done, you think, to maybe work on that? Because now, especially with Prop 2, if it goes through, and some other things, getting more that army, as it were, engaged in earlier in that
Right.
process is going to be valuable. So just wanted to know what you think and how we might be able to do that.
I just think that is hard. It is very difficult. I mean, if we look at the interest level of the average voter in an election, they're not interested in an election till maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks out. So it's hard to get volunteers that are that interested also. But I think like if our county parties did a little bit more to reach out and, educate people on how important it is to get involved at an earlier date, especially, going into these, there's such a short time period for candidates up to the primary, and then after the primary, it's just impossible practically. So they need to start building their team, and I think that I always think that we don't do enough to appreciate our volunteers. It was one of the things that I feel like I've really tried to do well, is anytime I would hold an event and I had volunteers that were helping, it's like, these people don't have to do this. And it's like, they're giving up their precious time.
Yeah.
And it's like, we better darn well appreciate what they're giving up to help. And so I think that's one way. I think it's just so important. And I feel that really the party has been short on that in the past. And it's something that, I really tried to concentrate on. But, having these big events, having these fun events is a great way to find the volunteers. And, it's like we need to continue to do it. It's like we need to message with all the different grassroots groups and, so that they know who we are and that they know that we're somebody that they want to work with. We have probably 40, 50, probably more than that, grassroots organizations in the state. And we all need to support each other so that when they come to me and ask for a favor, hey, will you send out this email? I can go to them and ask them the same thing. Can you send out this email? Can you find us volunteers? So often we work solo, and that has to, I think that the election protection program that I worked with Matt Sci-Fry was such a triumph, because it included so many grassroots organizations working together to recruit these people. So it's a great success story, and I think we can build on that.
Great, thank you. And you kind of hit on that a little bit too, which was one of the last questions here before we get into a couple that I see on the chat. With so many organizations out there that are trying to do similar things, but the same thing at the same time, right? You mentioned 30, 40, 50 grassroots and different things doing election, whatever it is. Do you have an idea of how to not just work with them, but say, how do we bring some synergy to it? Or is there a way to really mobilize all those different groups instead of their separate entities, as it were? It's almost like it's too sporadic if we kind of all congeal. So one of the questions I had that somebody put in was, do you have any ideas around that? How do you kind of get everybody to kind of work in that so we can mobilize and really do what you're saying, which is, get together and beat Democrats eventually, but
yeah,
without being so fractured, as it were.
Yeah. Well, I think there's an advantage in having all those separate groups. When I first became involved in the Tea Party around 2010, it's like the Democrats had a hard time destroying the Tea Party because there was no single leader for them to go after. So it was a good thing to have all these separate organizations. And I think that holds true today. And we proved with the election protection and even with Secure My Vote. I mean, all of these groups were involved with Secure My Vote. And while it's a great disappointment that if anything, it's like we achieved what we set out to do. However, the people that came up with Secure My Vote sent a boy and they should have sent a man. Mm-hmm. Although And what I mean by that is if they had come up with a petition that would have gone into our state constitution, we would have made it into our state constitution. However, I'm still very optimistic that just like with Prop 2, that's going to be struck from our state constitution. So it wouldn't have done us any good anyway. And now with the state house and in the Senate the way it is, we're just kind of like in a holding pattern there. The counts are very close in the House and the Senate. So I think that a lot of these, and I might be wandering a little bit here. So if you want me to come back, I will.
That's okay.
But I think it's interesting to note that so many of these seats that we lost in the House and the Senate were a very narrow vote. And I think that had to do a lot with Prop 3. So I have a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to regain the House and the Senate in 2024. But so secure my vote and the election protection was kind of a test run to see if we could all play together in the sandbox. And it worked very well. It's like, we all came together because we saw the greater good. So I think the groups are getting it. And I think they're more and more are willing to work together to achieve the greater good.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, I think that brings me to the end of some of the pre-submitted questions. Robin, with just Marian, I was able to keep up to date on some of the questions too. So other
Okay,
than
great.
the two that I see I don't think there's any more. So
I just
yep, go ahead.
have one short one. Was it Harper versus Moore? Is that the case in North
Yes.
Carolina? Do I have that right? Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And, it's like, so there's just a lot of good things, if I can, would you like me to close or I can keep talking?
No, it's okay. Well, we got a couple options. There are a couple of questions here in the queue.
Okay.
That people have put in for chat. And then since you're the only one, we'll give you whatever kind of wrap up time. If there's other things you want us to know, that the delegates and specifically, I think many on the phone are actually state delegates too. So if anybody needs to know anything ahead of convention or whatever, that'd be great too. And we'll give you time to do that. So if you don't mind, we'll just run through these last couple of questions here. And I think they're kind of two parts. I think there's initial question and then a follow-up question as well. So this one says, do you agree that poll workers, especially for the time period of a month before an election, when most of our voters have no idea, while the Democrat voters are working for the township city clerk's office, are much more important than recruiting challengers?
I think the question is, are election workers more important than poll challengers? And I remember a call that I was on, and it was a national call, and it was interesting because I don't know if anybody knows who Bridget Gabrielle is, and Cleta Mitchell. These are, people who are very involved in the election integrity. And I posed that question to them. And I said, so I'm recruiting poll challengers. How hard should I be recruiting election workers? Which one should I, be concentrating on?
Mhm.
And it's like 2 or 3 of them like jumped on and they're like, election workers, election workers, election workers. And I was just like, whoa, okay. Because I think that the feeling is you're inside. They're not going to be able to fudge numbers if there's someone sitting there at the table that's actually watching these numbers, and you're watching more carefully. As a poll challenger, they kind of mess with you. It's like, they'll, they come and stand in front of you, or other people do, other poll challengers. I've had Democrat poll challenger like come up and totally harass me about, my credentials, which were totally in order, so they don't do that if you're an election worker, and you can watch the tallies and you're part of the system. So for that reason, I think but I still think that the poll challenger is a very important role, because they know that we're there and we're watching the system. So I'm going to say it's probably like 60-40, 60 for the election worker, 40 for a poll challenger.
Sure. Okay. And I think you may have already hit on this in your answer, but here's the follow-up to kind of clarify that one as well. What is your strategy for promoting voters getting into poll worker positions a month or so before an election? This person says, my experiences have been that our state party has put too much effort into recruiting poll challengers, when in real operation, the poll workers are the front line where people can put eyes on the election operations, which I think goes to what you were just saying.
Yeah. Well, if we were to look at the election protection program, that program opened in January of 2022. And our goal was to recruit 5,000 election workers by March. Now, we knew that we had a little bit of a cushion, because you had to submit the names. We wanted the names submitted by May, so that these election workers would work in the primary in August, and then automatically be able be eligible to be election workers in November. So this was the priority. It wasn't until, I'm going to say, July, as I remember it, that we started looking then to heavily recruit poll challengers.
Okay. Very good. Anyone else? Questions? We got a couple extra minutes here. If not, we'll hand it back to Marian for a wrap up. I don't see any new questions in the chat.
Marian,
Anybody in
would
the
you be
audience?
willing to come to our legislative day, May 4th? Get with me after.
Sure.
I would love to have you.
Yeah. It's exciting, that we're seeing in the legislature that we have this Freedom Caucus. And, I think that, there's these 8 people that are willing to stand up. Now, this probably isn't something I should be talking about as a grassroots vice chair candidate, but I can't help it. It's like, I think it is outrageous that we have this tradition that whoever is the party in the majority, and when their candidate is nominated for Speaker of the House, that both parties vote for that candidate unanimously. It's like, no. I don't want to ever hear about a Republican voting for a Democrat. And so this is what recently happened. I personally think it's wrong. We didn't see that in the Congress when Kevin McCarthy ran. It's like, no, every Democrat voted against the appointment of Kevin McCarthy. So why in our home state is this like acceptable? Because it's tradition. It shouldn't be. And the 8 people that didn't go along with this were then punished by not giving committees, or giving only one committee or a weak committee. That, it's just wrong, but it's all part. I think so much of the division in our party is due to some of the people that were Republicans in our legislature. Because I think that so many people were so frustrated. I myself, and I think I mentioned, it's like I had made appointments. I had Eric Cardall from Minnesota fly in from the Thomas More Society, Judge Michael Gableman, who was the special investigator in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin received more Zuckerberg money. I'm sorry, we received more Zuckerberg money than Wisconsin. Yet they were uncovering all kinds of in back rooms, deals and corruption they uncovered that in the 4 major cities, that of the nursing homes, 100% of the people in the nursing homes voted.
Mhm.
This is, they could have a memory care hall and still. So, I mean, we brought this information to our legislator, and we were like so encouraging them to get a special investigator. We have to reinstill confidence in our elections. And they just wouldn't have anything to do with it. And I think this is what is tearing our party apart. We have all these new delegates that are so frustrated. They feel they've lost confidence in our elections, and our legislators did nothing to reinstill that confidence. And they could have done that. It's like, let's look at it then. Now we're looking at Michigan State,
Mhm.
U of M, Grand Valley, our major universities. You have the universities and the clerks, and I'm going to say they're colluding
Mhm.
with progressive organizations in order to corrupt our vote on the campuses. It's like it's totally a violation of equal protection when you are encouraging a group of people. Our clerks are encouraging a group of people to get out and vote, but 3 blocks down, where Millie Johnson lives, 70-year-old Millie Johnson, we're not doing anything to make voting any easier for her. So this is another great lawsuit that's going to be filed soon. It's exciting stuff. I think that we're going to have some really big wins here, and hopefully, enough that is also going on in the other states. And the more that one state works on it, the more the other states see the parallels
Mhm.
and know that this is what happened in their state too.
Right.
And the more likely we are to convince other state legislators that it really is something that they should investigate in their own states. So I'm excited about that. I'll talk 1 minute more, and this has been in the news. I'm one of 16 Trump electors, and yes, we are being sued by 3 Democrat electors
Mhm.
who have, for some reason, think that we're causing them a lot of mental anxiety,
Right.
which is, I don't know about it. I don't know about the other electors. Well, I do know about the other electors, but yeah, the last year has not been pleasant. I've had the FBI come to my door. I'm always like, am I going to get served tomorrow? I don't know. So talk about mental anguish.
Right.
Can I say something real quick and interject? Is that okay?
Sure.
Can you hear me?
We can.
That's what makes delegates and people fearful about getting into these positions, about in their groups, if they're going to be president, a vice president, a secretary, treasurer, any of these, they feel like there's a target on their back, and so then what's going to make these people in these organizations or clubs feel like they're going to want to continue, or the incentive there, they are winning this part of things with the big scare. They're just putting that out there, and that just kind of makes it more difficult.
Yeah. And so that's why, it's like, I can't even tell you how blessed I feel that I have made this connection with the Thomas More Society, because I was on the call. I don't know if anybody here knows about the prayer call, and I was on the prayer call the other night, and Eric Cardall, the Thomas More attorney from Minnesota, was supposed to be on it. He wasn't able to get on. His connection was bad. Afterwards, he and I were talking. He was going on to talk about the Great School Initiative. So he and I caught up later on a telephone call. And in the course of our conversation, I was telling him about the Trump elector suit. And it's just, you know, he said, you know what? He's like, let me talk to the head of the Thomas More Society. He's like, this is just wrong. And he and I, you know, we're both agreeing, this is intimidation. It's a way to get rid of, you know, very active people in the party. It's, you know, it intimidates you, it beats you down, it discourages you. You know, I know some of the 16 people are going, I after this, I'm done, you know, so it was just so wonderful and encouraging that, you know, he said, look, we can't, it's the Thomas More Society's viewpoint that we don't leave any soldiers behind. And, you know, and the next day he called and said, yeah, we're taking the case. This is, you know, it was like such a weight off of, you know, my shoulders, and I'm sure the other 15,
Right.
because it's draining on you to, I'm in my basement right now. And it's like, I've had all my drapes drawn. It's craziness going on. It's craziness.
Right.
But, you know, it's like, we're not giving up. It's too important. I have children, I have grandchildren all in Michigan. And, you know, we have to fight for them.
Well, we definitely appreciate you and others that are taking on the leadership and stepping up. And I don't know about anybody else, but we definitely pray for everybody that's in those leadership roles, because it does, like Karen said, it does feel like sometimes there's a target on your back. And so we definitely hold you in high regard and appreciate all you guys stepping into that and doing that. So just as a quick time check, we have about 9 minutes. So if there's no other questions, I was going to give the floor back to Marian, and she can sum up any last statements or re-loop on anything we've talked about, and any last thoughts or things that the delegates. Oh, Karen, you said you had a question? One more question, Karen. Go ahead.
Yes, well, just one more subject about, you mentioned, Heath, a little bit about people being on the same page, staying the same, you know, uniting as a party, that we're just in these smaller groups in the counties. We are experiencing some difficulties with differing opinions on just basic things, like basic structural things that happen within the party, that I'm feeling like we need some uniform rules or regulations, laws set down to not just provide a little safety net for some of the people who are in there, say have a basic bylaw situation where every group has the same bylaws, just a suggestion. But I really feel that would help with the uniform ideas, because there's always some of those that are branched off there that are going to say, oh, these new people are coming up with these new things and new ideas, and we're happy with the old thing, the way things were, like that. And it's hard to sway people like that to come up with forming new things. And when you want your party to, everything has to evolve a little bit through all this process. And if they don't, some people aren't open-minded enough to accept some of these things, then maybe it has to come from higher up. And then maybe they will say, well, if all the other clubs are this, yeah, maybe we should follow suit. Just a thought.
Yeah. I kind of think, though, that just like we have, I think it's 1,500 clerks in our state, Michigan is very segmented, and it's not a bad thing. And I kind of view that as our county and district parties too, that it's a good thing, I think, that delegates can get together and decide how they want their county bylaws written. So I'm not sure if it's like, I'm not sure if the heavy hand of the state party coming down and telling every congressional district or county how they're supposed to run, what their bylaws are, is a good idea. doesn't mean that I'm right.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
my opinion initially is,
Uh-huh.
it's kind of like, it's part of, it's part of what,
Can I ask you, can I ask you a question? If most of the clubs or most of the organizations in Michigan, do they have bylaws or
oh, yeah.
some don't? Are there quite a few without?
Oh, are you saying the clubs? Or are you talking about like, the
Well,
party structure?
no, just any of the party structures. Do they,
Well,
are there more in Michigan? Are there a lot of them in Michigan that do not have those type of things in their organizations? Like
every,
bylaws?
yeah, every county has to have their own bylaws.
They have to?
Mhm, mhm.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
and the districts have to have their own bylaws.
Thank you.
So when we have, because all the counties meet individually for their county conventions. Well, you have to have your own rules that,
Right. Okay,
rule that county convention.
okay.
Great. All right. So Marian, want to say thank you again for joining tonight. I appreciate this. It was definitely a full-filled 1 hour, full hour. So that was great conversation, very good questions and answers. So I'm going to give you the last couple minutes we have remaining. So just anything that we need to know about you or your role or anything, I would just appreciate it. And I'll just hand it back to you.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I probably only mentioned some of the things that I'm presently working on. And I think that serving in the role as a Grassroots vice chair, I can do these things without being Grassroots vice chair, but it certainly helps to have the title. 2 weeks ago, I met with a donor, with someone from the Great School Initiative. And I was able to set that up because when I called the donor, I could say, that not just, this is Marian Sheridan. Well, who are you? It's like, I'm Grassroots vice chair for the Michigan Republican Party. So it opens doors like that a little bit easier. So for that reason, I thought it was beneficial. Like, I think I can benefit some of these initiatives that I'm working on, like the Great School Initiative. It's like it helps you to develop more of these connections, which I think that, I'm just like so excited with the connections that I've been able to form these last 2 years and create, put these election integrity groups together. I set up meetings with the Thomas More Society and several of the election integrity organizations. We had meetings where these groups would come in and present the information that they were finding from their research. And the Thomas More attorneys would look at it and go like, okay, this is something that we can use. We're going to work with you on this. So it's like, I feel like it allows me to be a liaison between different grassroots organizations and people from other states, even organizations from other states that are able to come in and help Michigan, because we're in a bad spot. We're really in a bad spot, but I have reason to believe that there's a lot of good people in Michigan and even outside of Michigan that realize what's going on. And, they're coming, we're all pulling together to help rescue Michigan. So for that reason, I'd like to win your vote and hope that, you'll help me on some of these programs and we can move Michigan forward.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And just as a last comment from me, just, at the county level, we're very passionate here in Van Buren County to continue to do more and grow and things. So as you think of things that from a county perspective, we can do better and move in that regard, especially from a delegate perspective or whatever, we're all in when it comes to that as well. So we appreciate that and your energy and drive to do that. So with this recording, I'll be able to share it. I'll share it with you. I'll put it out on YouTube, and we'll be sure to get that out to everybody so they can share it and use it as well for whatever they need to. So with that, thank you again, Marian. Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. And you guys have a good evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yep. Bye-bye.